You're listening to the Transformations with Jayne podcast. I'm your host, Jayne Nakata, a New Zealander living her best life in Fukushima, Japan. I'm a podcast consultant and the creator of Pod Launch with Jayne, a system that helps you create your dream podcast without all the drama and hassle, leaving you more free time to do the things you love to do. This show is for people who want to hear stories of women who are doing amazing things here in Japan and across the world. You'll find loads of inspiration for how you can live your best life wherever you are. I'm glad you're here. Let's get on with the show. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Transformations with Jayne podcast. I'm your host, Jayne Nakata, coming to you from Fukushima Prefecture here in Japan. So I have just come back from a really fun weekend away. I went down to Tokyo for 2 days. I stayed one night down in Tokyo and I met up with some of my friends and I sat outside at beautiful cafes and ate delicious food and had like a 3-tier afternoon tea and did all the fun things that you get to do when you're in Tokyo. Just really felt like I had blown out all the cobwebs of being up here in Fukushima and spending a lot of time on my computer and not really seeing people face to face. So it was really such a refreshing weekend away. And I'm really glad that I got the chance to do that. So thank you to my support team here in Fukushima. It was my husband, basically, who was in charge while I was away. Yeah, so you may or may not know that I have actually started another podcast. I swore I would never do this because podcasting is a lot of work. I won't lie. There's a lot of things that need to be done, recording and editing or not editing and creating graphics and sharing it and getting people to listen. There are so many things that need to be done. But then the exact right chance came along to do a second podcast. But instead of it being a solo show like this with interviews, it's actually in collaboration with Catherine O'Connell. The name of the new show is Jandals in Japan. It's a show for New Zealanders who want to know more about business and life in Japan, bringing New Zealand products to Japan, entering the Japanese market. So if that's something you're interested in, please hop over and support the show. We would really, really appreciate it. But when I was in the sort of development phase of the show, although I know how to do all of it, I was having this sort of why me moment. Like, why are we doing this? Why should we be the ones to launch this show? And why hasn't anyone else done this? And then I just thought, well, who cares? We're here, we're doing it. We have everything to make it work. We might not be experts on every single industry in Japan, but we know enough to get started and to be able to bring out the knowledge from all our guests that we have coming on the show. And for me, it fulfills something that I hadn't quite managed yet in my life here in Japan. And it's something that's really important to me, which even as a high school student, I knew I wanted to do something that was helping people to understand each other, helping other cultures to understand each other. And I thought that the way to do that was to become a diplomat. And so I had my sights set on learning Japanese and doing a law degree at university and getting into the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, becoming a diplomat and going all around the world and sitting in on negotiations and all these sort of things that I had in my mind. However, when I got to university and realized exactly what studying law looks like, and I realized what actually law is not for me, and I gave up on that idea of creating international understanding because I thought that was the only way I could do it. But now that I've been in Japan for 20 years coming up in this August, I've realized that there are other ways that I can do this. It doesn't have to be through that one way that I had envisaged as a 17-year-old in rural New Zealand. So creating this podcast definitely ticks that off. It's a way to help New Zealanders understand more about Japan, and it's a way to showcase my beautiful home country of New Zealand to Japanese people more. And getting to work with organizations both in New Zealand and Japan to facilitate that is something that I'm really super excited about. And I would never have imagined that a few years ago. So it just goes to show that you just never know, right? You never know where things are taking you. But if you have that goal in mind, even if it's not clear exactly what the vehicle is that you're going to use to get there, the vehicle, in this case, it's a podcast. It's starting out as a podcast, and I'm not sure how it's going to morph as we go along. We've only recorded a few episodes so far, but it's definitely going to evolve and change as we move along. So at the moment, the vehicle is the podcast, and using the connections and network that both Catherine and I have built over the 20 years that we've been in Japan. So that's really exciting, and I just wanted to share that with you, and I hope that inspires you to think about whatever it is that you might have been dreaming about or thinking about and wondering how to get started. Just do something, and then the next step will appear to you, I'm sure. My guest today is Paige Baldwin Ando from Whole Self Creative. She is a creativity coach. So I am someone who grew up sort of thinking I was not so much the creative one in my family. There are some very creative members in my family, but it turns out I can be creative too. So this episode really speaks to me a lot, and I hope you will enjoy the insights that Paige has about how we can be more creative or how we can get out of our own way when it comes to creating things. And she also talks about her lovely morning creativity group that she has every Monday morning, which I attended and I really enjoyed. So I hope that some listeners of the Transformations with Jayne podcast will become regular visitors to that creativity session. So without further ado, let's get on with the show. Hi, Paige. Welcome to the Transformations with Jayne podcast. It's great to have you on the show today.
Thanks for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
So, Paige, please introduce yourself for all of our listeners.
Sure. So I am a creativity coach. I am originally from the US. I've been here in Japan for almost 20 years. So a good long while. And in my coaching life, I work with people from around the world who are trying to get the most out of their creative work, whether that means really improving what they're doing already, what they've already got going and increasing their momentum or increasing their enjoyment of it, or whether it means finishing something that they started a long time ago that they never have quite gotten to the full capacity of finishing, or starting something. So people come to me at all levels of their creative journey to help them to get the most out of what they want to do creatively.
Wow. Yeah, I can imagine that it's so much fun to support these people through these journeys of creating things and finishing things. Finishing creative projects can be a bit tricky, right?
Yes, it really is so much fun. And it really is so gratifying to help people do what they want to do, because that's the thing. So often we have these ideas for creative projects, and in our minds, it's so exciting and they look a certain way. And then as we start to act, very often it doesn't look like how we think it's going to. And sometimes the emotional impact of that can be trying. It can be very difficult when what you want to do is not what's happening as you take the action to make it happen. So that is where I do think having somebody to talk to about what's normal creatively, what we all experience, what can be expected to happen as we try to create, having somebody to be there with you, first of all, is quite rare, isn't it? Normally we're creating in a solitary sort of situation. So to have somebody to talk to about it is a rare and lovely thing. But also, just having somebody there to talk to normalizes so much of that experience. And it helps us to then be like, oh, okay, back on the horse, nothing's wrong with me. This is normal creatively. Somebody else gets it. I'm okay. Gonna try again.
Yeah, I totally get that. And I see that a lot with what I do with podcasting, same kind of thing. Yeah, a lot of people want to start a podcast, but when they start it, they're like, oh, my podcast doesn't sound like NPR or whatever, they're comparing themselves to,
Yeah.
which is, of course, not what's going to happen. And even my podcast after 4 years does not sound like NPR, and I don't really care that it doesn't anymore. But when you're getting started and you think, oh, who's going to listen to this? Well, someone will. And that's really great to never podcast alone, as I always say. Never. Yes. And also to have a chance to create together. Yeah, that's really nice. Yeah. Yes. All right. Well, we'll definitely go back to this, but I want to get your coming to Japan story. Why are you here? How did you get here? You've been here 20 years, about 20 years. Yeah. So I came in 2002, August 2002. Yes. How about you?
So I just realized as I said that this year is 2022. I came in 2003. So it's been almost 19 years.
19 years, right.
In April, it'll be 19 years. Yes, I came. So I was living, I'm from the US, and I was living in Portland, Oregon, where I was a massage therapist. And that is fun, amazing, wonderful work. But I always say, you can't live in Portland, Oregon and throw a stick without hitting a massage therapist. Like there were so many of us. Mm-hmm. And it was very hard to make a living at it, you know. And I had been abroad as a university student, and I knew that I wanted to do that again. But as a massage therapist, it was like, I can't even make enough money to like live, how am I going to travel? So I thought I could combine making money and traveling by getting a job somewhere elsewhere in the world. So I did a bunch of research, and I just felt so drawn to Japan as a place that was safe and open, and it just felt really good to me to come to Japan. So I applied for a job at Ion, the conversation school. And I arrived, during cherry blossom season in 2003, and worked at a school in Kichijoji in Tokyo for 2 years. And I originally thought I would stay for a year or two and maybe move on somewhere else and like have my adventure,
Famous last words. Yes.
Famous last words here 19 years later. I then, developed a life here and met friends and met my husband, the man who's now my husband. And it little by little, slowly kind of sunk into my life here in Japan. And every time I think of leaving, it's not that I couldn't be tempted to go somewhere else. The world is big and interesting, but Japan has been so good to me. It's very often how I think about it. Japan has helped me to have a beautiful life. I have 2 children who I love. I have a husband who's wonderful. And I just enjoy like the creativity of this culture is unparalleled. Walking around in Tokyo, seeing what people are doing and making just lights me up and excites me. And even when I see it on TV, I see Tokyo on TV and I get like excited. Like I live here, but I still feel excited by it. And I think that's something special, to feel that way, even after a couple of decades somewhere.
Yeah, I feel that too. It gets under your skin somehow, and then you can't get rid of it, kind of thing. Yes. Right?
And I think it's also just so endlessly, I will never get bored of Japanese culture or the language. It's just not possible. There's too much to discover and learn and understand. And I'm never going to cover all that territory, no matter how long I'm here. Even if I live here 120 years, it'll still be interesting. There will still be things that I don't know. Definitely. So I really love that about it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So where obviously you came as an Eon teacher, I came as a Nova teacher. So there's a lot of synchronicities in our stories, and same kind of time, that was the way to come to Japan at that time. There weren't really any other kind of jobs for foreigners so much as there is now. There's many, many ways you can come and work in Japan these days, I feel. How did you go from being an Eon teacher to doing what you're doing now?
That's a great question. It's been a long journey. I haven't been an Eon teacher since 2005. So after that, I did go into publishing. I worked for Eon writing their textbooks and
Wow, really? Oh,
yes, doing what's called kyōzai kaihatsu, so like curriculum development. Um, Writing not just the textbooks, but like how the course should go through the year. And I actually worked on books that were for fifth and sixth graders. So the age that my children are now, actually, my daughter is about to go into sixth grade. And yeah, so I wrote and edited at that job for a couple of years. And then I knew that I would like to have children. So I took a class in Japanese. I also knew that I would not be able to do that without improving my Japanese. My Japanese was not at the level where I could function in society by that point, because I had really been working only in English specific jobs. So I took an intensive course in Japanese, and I had my son. And then very soon after, a year and a half after, I had my daughter. Wow. And those years, I did spend years focused solely on mothering. And slowly I got back into writing and editing freelance. But during that time when my kids were small, I had this feeling of like, I want to make something, but I don't know even what. Like, I felt the creative urge blocked within me. I wanted to do something creative, but I felt so far from it in my like mothering fog that it was distressing to me. I felt distressed, that I couldn't do. And not only that I couldn't do what I wanted to do, but I didn't even know what I wanted to do. I was so far from it. It was just this vague feeling of like, something is missing. Yeah. It's creativity. What do I even do? And at that point, this is the kind of person I am. I'm a researcher at heart. I love to research. And so I started researching about creative blocks. And in so doing, I found this training for creativity coaching. And when I started reading about it, the thing that happens when you just start reading about something and a light goes on and you're like, yes, this. So that's what happened. And this was back in 2012. I took the training. It was a pretty intense training that involved a lot of practical work, practice with other people within the training group. And then we gradually moved out to other people who we knew. And so for about 10 years, I've been doing creativity coaching, starting with that tiny little urge in myself that I couldn't, like an itch I couldn't scratch, really took me to this work.
Wow. How interesting. And this is 10 years we're talking. Coaching was hardly even a thing, right? 10 years ago, right? Now coaching is like, everybody knows what coaching is, but 10 years ago, like, what do you need a coach for art for? What's the matter with you? Or for your you need a coach for your creativity? What's your problem? But now it's like, of course I need a coach for my creativity. My creativity needs to be coached, or whatever aspect of your life you want help with. It's much more accepted or known about these days.
That's right. Well, and I think especially for creativity, people might think, well, if I need a coach, that must mean I'm not really creative.
Right. I obviously shouldn't be doing this. I should just put the paintbrush down and go back to whatever I was doing. Yeah.
Yeah. But I actually think the reverse is true. I think that creative people, you wouldn't be blocked unless you had the creative urge. You wouldn't have any kind of impediment to your creativity if you didn't have that creative urge and that feeling. And blocks are just a natural part of creating. They happen to every creator. Like Hayao Miyazaki has been blocked. Anybody who's written any novel, anybody who's made any movie, anybody who's done any creative thing has felt an obstruction to their creativity at some point, and even regularly. It is a part of the creative process to feel that frustration or that something's not right. Like, those feelings are just part of it. Just like if you are running a marathon, there are obstacles. Anything that we're doing, that is worth doing involves obstacles.
Yeah.
And so when we have somebody who gets it and can talk to us about it and help us through it, like a coach, like a sports coach too, that's what athletic coaches do as well, is to help you through. If you're a soccer player, you don't think, well, I don't need a coach. Because it should be easy.
I should know how to do this. Yeah, I should know how to play soccer to Olympic level. Yes.
Right. Easily in the first day.
Yeah. And what's the point in that? Yeah, there's no fun in that, actually, right? If it's so easy and you don't struggle a little bit. Exactly. And yeah, I can see how having, I mean, I love using coaching to get myself to do various things that otherwise I might avoid, or I want to do, but I don't really know how to do it. And that guidance is like a fast track to doing it.
Yes, it really is. It really can get you where you want to go, not only in a way that is smoother, but also in a way that is emotionally more fulfilling for you. There's a lot less struggle when you have somebody alongside you who is normalizing the process for you and helping you see from a 360 vantage point, like things that you cannot see for yourself from where you are in your own creative process. It's emotionally a lot easier and a lot less painful.
Mm-hmm. What's one of those 360 view things that people can't see that pops up quite often?
Yeah, it's there's an announcement going on. I don't know if that's...
Oh, it's the J alert.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, right now we're having the J alert. This is a practice for when missiles get launched at Japan. Yay. It's 11 o'clock. I knew that was going to happen at 11 o'clock. But
are you having it there too? I didn't know.
Supposedly, but my phone's not bleeping. And I should be getting an email, I think, from the city saying, this is a practice. Anyway, we might leave this in. This is a fun little bit of life in Japan for people.
That little tune was the end. So
yeah, that's a neighborhood announcement system you have in your area. We don't have one of those here. My family in Totori has one in their living room, in their dining room, and it goes off every morning and every night with the village announcements.
Wow.
And it's so painfully boring most of the time, but we all have to sit there quietly and listen while they go through all the announcements about all the sort of little things that are happening in their teeny weeny village. Sometimes my father-in-law's on there announcing something about I like to call it the old dude's kai, the old men, who make all the decisions about the village. Gets on there and says, "Oh, we're having our meeting tonight at 8 o'clock at the hall," and we all sit there and listen to him. Anyway, that's just a fun little aside about Japan. And what I was saying before we were interrupted by the J alert practice was, what are some of these 360 things that a creativity coach can see that people in their wherever they are can't see? What are some things that pop up that
it's a great often? Yeah. Well, very often, when we are in any situation for ourselves, what we see is only our own vantage point. That's just the nature of being a person, right? We can only see from our own point of view. And let's say, for example, you're trying to write a novel, and as you're writing, you come upon a block of like, well, I just feel like the plot isn't working. I don't know what to do about the plot. Here's everything that's happening. There are these holes. It must mean that I shouldn't be doing this. It must mean whatever we make it mean.
Burn it. Yeah.
We make stories in our heads, based on... That's also a normal human thing to do. And what a coach can do very often is come in and say, right, that is a very common thing to feel at this time, at this juncture in where you are in your project. It makes sense that you're feeling this because you've reached a point in your project where you've put a lot of work into it. Maybe it's starting to get a little boring. Maybe there's some other stuff that, feels like it's, if you have shiny stuff syndrome, something else starts feeling This is all very normal. It's a normal part of the process, and it doesn't mean anything, unless you make it mean that. So we get to decide what the meaning is of whatever is happening. And when we're in that situation ourselves, when we're the novelist, we're the one trying to write, it's so easy to believe the inner narrative, that internal narrative that comes through our brain, that comes galloping through as if it's the truth.
Yes.
But having one other person there to say, or even just to ask questions, you know, it helps to pull us out of that perspective and give us a wider vantage point of, oh, okay, right. Maybe I don't have to believe that thought. Maybe there are other options. And that alone, even if that happens one time in the whole process, it's incredibly liberating, you know?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But to have it through the process really helps to pull us out of those points faster and help us to get to, again, like to take away that emotional volatility or heaviness that can come along with creating anything. It just really helps to make the whole experience more fun.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah.
I totally have experienced that same thing. Like most weeks I'll be like, oh, I think I should just blow up my business and walk away from it, you know, even though things are going really well. And it's just because I have these random thoughts that come into my head that are not true. And I'm just noticing, okay, you're having one of those thoughts. Let's just not listen to yourself right now, because that is not helpful. And I'll go to sleep, wake up the next day, like, what was that all about? Move on. Yeah. But I have been able to come to that through practice. Yeah. Practicing, noticing that, oh, these thoughts that I'm having, I'm a human having a thought that's not helpful right now. And move on. Or, you know, obviously I don't want people to not like trust their judgment or trust their intuition and all of that. But then there's a difference between that and self-sabotage as well, right? How do you know? Do you have any insights into that?
I do. Yes.
Ooh,
this is
yay, tell us.
This is my favorite topics.
Oh, yay.
I think very often the voice that is trying to stop us, you know, I think of it as a protector. This is a voice that it's a fear. It's fear, really. And it's trying to protect us because the human brain is made to keep us alive.
Sure.
You know, and so we have this inner protector that feeds us these thoughts that say stop, you know, and they can come in any form. They can come in the form of like, let's not get out of bed today, or why don't we watch Netflix instead? Aren't there some dishes that need to be done? Like they can really come in any form. And when the thoughts come in a form that is that feels constricted in your body, if you feel your body getting tight, you know, like that chest caving in kind of feeling, or like you feel tight around it, usually that is the fear voice, the protector voice. And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't pay attention to it. Very often that voice, what it needs is loving attention. It does not need us to fight back against it, because it is good for us. It is for us. It's our friend. It wants to keep us alive. It wants to keep us safe and protected. It's not our enemy. What it needs is for us to say, oh, yes, I hear you. I hear you. You would rather do the dishes than go paint, because painting is something new and you're feeling a little scared about it. I get that, you know. In those kinds of situations, and this is another like little side note that we could maybe a path that we could take later, but I very often suggest to people that they just do the tiniest step possible in, like, let's say you do want to paint, like you could just go and like open your paint set, your watercolor,
go and look at your paint stuff.
And leave it and go wash the dishes. And then that inner protector is like, oh, she opened the paint set and nothing bad happened. Maybe this is actually okay, you know. So that to me is how we know whether it's a fear voice or not, is we feel that closing down and that tightening up and that no, like, but when something is intuitive, when something is our intuitive, instinctual voice, it feels more like a yes. It feels more flowing and open and like even physically open, you know, like your chest is opening. There's that almost like sparkly kind of feeling that you sometimes get when something feels good, like it's the right thing to do. That's how we know something is intuition, you know? So even if your intuition is telling you this is not the right path, it's going to feel in a way like a rightness to it. You know, there is a different sense in your body than there is when it's just like a fear, close you down, don't do anything, stop right now kind of feeling. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so that fear voice or feeling can almost always be pacified by a little bit of self-love or self-kindness that you would, as you would show your own children when they're scared, basically.
Exactly.
You don't shout at them and go, "Oh, what's the matter with you?"
Exactly. Yes.
Get on with it. You're like, okay, you're feeling scared. Okay, let's do this together, or whatever it is, Yeah,
yes,
that's what
exactly.
you need.
Because that part of you, that fear part of all of us, is located like neurobiologically in the amygdala, which is our, reptile brain, is the oldest, most primitive part of our brain that is there literally to keep us alive, like to stop you from being hit by a bus, or like it's not sophisticated. It doesn't really understand the full complexity of the situation. All it knows is she wants to do something new. I better stop her. I'm worried that this might be a dangerous thing for us to do. And my job is to keep us from dying. And I don't know if the new thing might kill us. So I better tell her to wash the dishes instead,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so tell us a story about someone who got through this. Like, you don't have to give names or anything, but okay. I'd love to hear a story or an example of someone who was like too scared to paint or whatever, but somehow got through it.
Yes. Okay. Well, I have a wonderful client who is a visual artist. She does a number of different things. She is both a painter. She works with ceramics. She sometimes also does fabric arts and that type of thing. And when we first started working together, she has a studio in her house. And she told me that she didn't even want to go in there. Like just going in there felt like a kind of pressure, because it does happen that way. So when we have been not working for a little while, for whatever reason, we got a cold or, our kids needed our help or whatever it is, for a while, if we have stopped working, it can feel like, oh, there's so much pressure. I have to, and I should, and why didn't I? And all of these voices, that the thoughts that come in that tell us something's wrong with you, that you haven't been working, right? Anytime she tried to go into her studio, those voices would kind of come in and it felt bad. So she didn't want to go in there, That makes total sense to me. And so what we did together was we worked on, when I talk about that protector, that, that part of us that wants to give us little obstacles so that we're safe. What we did together was we started to personify that part of her. So I said, like, if that was a character, what kind of character would it be? And she, kind of just like reflected for a moment and said, it's a clown. It's like, it's one of those clowns.
Scary clown.
Scary, but also like kind of goofy. And, it wants to stop me from like climbing the stairs to my studio. And so we talked about how she could have a conversation with this character and give him the reassurance that he needed to feel like, oh, okay, it's actually okay. So what she did was we started with these small steps, which I mentioned earlier. The first thing she did was she literally climbed the stairs, opened the door, and left. That was enough. Because what her fear character needed to feel was nothing bad's going to happen if we go in that room. And then the next small step was, this is probably why I mentioned painting earlier, was to open up her paints and put the paper on the desk and leave. And little by little, as she started to do that, her clown character began to relax. And she actually said she imagined him like sitting in a beanbag chair in the room, just hanging out because he felt relaxed, realizing like nothing bad's going to happen in here, And once you do, even if I know that like the small steps sound ridiculous, they sound like they're not going to work. And what I often say to people is like, they work exactly because of that, because they're so tiny that they seem stupid. That fear protector part of you is like, well, that doesn't count. That doesn't matter. It's not enough to get that part of you to block you. And once that protector part of you sees, oh, we can go in that room or we can open the paint set, nothing bad happens, then it's almost like an avalanche of creative energy can come through.
Wow. That's a really great story. And if you've never experienced it before, you might be wondering, wow, is that a thing? But I certainly have. And I can, like from whatever reason or childhood, someone said your painting is terrible, in third grade art class or something, that you don't want to do something creative. Or, I've been doing a lot of creative stuff, creating and making all these things for my clients. I'm like, where is this coming from? I've never done this before. I've never thought of myself as someone who could do this, but look at me doing this. And it kind of feels like a muscle that I've built up in this particular area where before I would have said, don't ask me, I get overwhelmed and I don't know what to do, which is basically what I've always said in the past. Please create these visual graphics or something. Let's use visual graphics that we use for podcasts as an example. Never wanted to do them before because I was like, don't ask me to choose the colors. There's just too many colors and I don't know. And I'm overwhelmed and no, I need to take a nap.
Right.
But now I'm like, actually, I think this will be good. Or why don't we just steal those colors and modify them a bit or whatever. You're building that creativity muscle as well. Just like you would build your running muscles or your Japanese speaking muscle. That's another muscle. Listening to Japanese for hours and hours on end and being able to not be exhausted by the end, right? That's another kind of muscle that we definitely have here in Japan.
Yes, it's exactly like that. It is exactly like that. And, what I often ask people to do too, to help them build their confidence, is to think of something that you have already done in the past, whether it's creative or not, where you had to move past obstacles. Mm-hmm. How did you do it? What helps you to move past the obstacles? Because we each have very different ways of dealing with whatever is in our way, creatively or otherwise. It's why I think that, very prescriptive ideas of how to get through creative blocks very often don't work. If you read a book by Stephen Pressfield, like, The War of Art, or Julia Cameron, like The Artist's Way, and you try to do what they want you to do and it doesn't work for you, very often, people can think, oh no, this must mean like something's wrong with me, because Stephen Pressfield and Julia Cameron, these are giants of the field and they know what they're talking about. But the fact is that any prescriptive way of doing anything very often doesn't work for us, because we are our own unique individuals with our own unique ways of going about things, our own unique ways of solving problems, our own unique obstacles that come up for us frequently. And so when we have an external source kind of telling us what to do, sometimes it can do more harm than good. Because what we really need is to look within ourselves. What works for me as a person? And looking to our past experiences can really help us do that, because we already have a treasure trove of information about ourselves, what works and what doesn't. If you know that waking up at 5 a.m. to create something does not work for you, no matter who tells you to do it, it's still not going to work for you, So I really find that also extremely valuable in terms of the coaching relationship, to have an individual who can look at you as an individual and say, well, it seems to me that maybe you don't like waking up at 5 a.m.
Yeah.
Could that be part of it?
You're a night owl and you should be creating at midnight, not 5 a.m. Yeah.
Right. And I think that's another example of the 360 perspective also. Like sometimes we can't see that from our own point of view because we just think, well, this book that I read said that waking up at 5 a.m. is the way to do it. So that's what I should do.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work for me, that must mean something is wrong with me. Not the case.
Yeah, it's always good to read, to read and find these things, but to know that potentially that person wasn't struggling with the same things you're struggling with. So that may not be the answer to your problems. And like productivity is another one where people who put out productivity books never really struggled with productivity in a way that people who really struggle with productivity struggle, right? So yeah, it's just a place to find ideas that maybe could work and maybe not. But yeah, looking within, like, yeah, you generally have everything you need within to figure it out somehow. And yeah, using someone like Paige, someone like you, to help people see that. Yeah, hold the mirror up for you and stand with you and look in the mirror can be really, really nice way to do it. So yeah, tell us a little bit about some of the things, like if people want to hang out more with you, what can they do?
Yeah, so I have a few different things that I do. I have a weekly free session that I do, which you joined a few weeks ago, and I loved having you there. It's called Co-Creation Time, and Co-Creation Time happens every Monday morning at 8:30 Japan time. And what it is basically we get together in a group over Zoom, and everybody is individually in their own homes doing their own creative project. So we might have somebody painting, another person doing guitar, another person writing. People are working on their own thing. And we spend about 5 minutes at the beginning talking about what we're up to, just letting each other know today I'm going to do, like a painting project. And after we all say hi and talk to each other, we mute our mics and we work. We do whatever it is that we're hoping to work on that day. And what is amazing about this container, this space, is that having the other people there working alongside you creates a kind of momentum, like a creative momentum that is, to me, incredibly empowering. I get more done in that hour of the week than I might get done in 3 hours on another day, in part because I know that my friends are there doing it with me. And they're also just coming from all over the world. And it's really cool to hear, oh, this person's in Canada and doing this, and this person's in Australia and doing this, and these people are in Japan. I love that feeling of connection of with people all over the world being creative at the same time. So we're doing that. And then we spend about 5 minutes at the end coming back together and saying, this is how it went, and cheering each other on. Sometimes we'll show each other what we did, if it's a showable thing. There is one person who joins almost every week who loves to practice guitar during that time, and he very often will show us, what he practiced that day. So that's one offering that I have that's offered weekly. I also have monthly workshops. So I'm working on offering, it's just a 1 hour thing that is actually this month, the topic is soothing your inner critic. So
timely.
Yeah, connects back to what we were talking about. And next month in March, it will be about the voice, like finding your creative voice. So those monthly workshops are an hour long. They are usually at 10 o'clock on Sunday mornings, Japan time. And you can find those on my website. Great. And then I do also have a writing group that I do. So writing is my great passion. I love many things creatively, but writing is really at the core of who I am creatively. And that is also once a month on the first Friday of every month in the evening. So all of that is available on my website to find out more about.
Yay. Yeah. I only managed to get there once to their creativity. What's it called? The co-create. Yeah. And I was just blown away by the creativeness of everyone and how much fun everyone was having in their own little boxes on Zoom. Like obviously everybody's in a different country or a different place doing something different. And it totally lifted my game on, I'm going to knuckle down. I'm going to bring all my creative juices to this project that I want to work on for the next sort of like 50 minutes, right? That you've got sort of 5 minutes each side. And then coming back and, how did this, someone was cleaning out their basement. That was one. And they showed us the crazy and wild things that they found when they were cleaning out their basement. It was so much fun. And some other even very small members of your group were doing amazing things. And it was just really inspiring to hear, a book or a poem. What would it be like if I wrote a poem? I think it just, lifts everybody's game, but it also just inspires everyone forward as well. So that's a really wonderful service that you have that people can come and enjoy on a Monday morning. And it's lovely to have that connection to start the week off on a positive note with some creating something, or maybe ticking something off that you wanted to do in your creative world before you dive into all the things you have to do for other people, your inbox or whatever it is. Yeah,
exactly. Yes. Yeah, it is. It really, and also I think what happens is that once you are creating something, even if you're working on it and 50 minutes is a small chunk of it, you have started. And very often that's enough momentum to really get you going and keep you going for quite a while, which is part of what I like about it. And yes, many people do use the time for clearing space for their creativity. So cleaning, emptying their inbox, doing the things they have to do on a clerical level to make the emotional or mental space or physical space to be able to create. That also is totally welcome. It's not just for doing something creative. Oh, and I should also mention that it's completely free. That one is
such a great service. Thank you for providing that for anyone. And you don't have to be in Japan. Obviously, you can be anywhere as long as you can join at that time. It's not recorded or anything. There's no that's not the point. It's to show up live and to be there. So before we finish up today, I want to ask you my final question, which is about Japan, bringing us back to Japan. What's your only in Japan experience, or when you thought, I'm definitely in Japan now, or just something really, that's a great insight to Japan that you've experienced? Could be recently or a long time ago. I know sometimes it all becomes a blur when we've been here so long.
It really does. It's, I was thinking the other day that I've been here, almost as long as I lived in my home country.
Yeah, I'm getting there too. Yeah.
It's interesting. So sometimes, it does feel like a bit of a blur, but I think that for me, a big part of my integration into Japanese society has been schooling my children's schools, because, well, for one thing, I think that the elementary schools are almost like they are the foundation of Japanese society in many ways. You learn how to participate in society in a Japanese elementary school in a way that you don't anywhere else. And so for me, helping my children through elementary school has been huge. Also, for almost as if I'm going to elementary school too. There's a lot to learn. So my son, he's now in his first year of middle school, but when he was in third grade, back in the pre-COVID days, every year they would have these parent meetings, so at the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, and the end of the year, they had these meetings where you'd go in. And most often it was mothers, but sometimes grandparents or dads would come too. And you'd talk about your child, so the teacher would give a little presentation about things. And then one by one, each person would stand up and talk a bit about their child. And on that day, this would have been the last meeting of my son's third grade year, I happened to be the very last person who was going to talk, which is always, as you might have experienced too, a bit of a bonus, because you get to hear other people first and think like, okay, what should I say? How should
Literally copying what everybody else has already said. Thank you. I'll take that.
Yes. Even to the point of like the greetings, like,
yep. What's the appropriate greeting in this situation? Thank you. Someone's given me that little leg up. Oh my God. Yes. Don't make the foreigner go first. Yeah.
I would forget those things for sure. Yeah. So I was last, and everyone had been saying like something that their child had struggled with that year. So I stood up and I said, my son is struggling with learning kanji. Like the kanji in the third grade, they really kick up to being a little harder. And there's also more of them. I think third grade might be the year that there are the most, like the number of kanji is the most learned.
Maybe.
So I was saying, we speak English at home. We don't use Japanese at home. And I didn't learn kanji in my elementary school because I didn't go to Japanese elementary school. So I don't really know how to help him. And sometimes it's really difficult for me. And I have this very visual memory of looking out over the sea of faces and seeing this simultaneous look of shock come over everyone's face. And I had this moment of just not understanding, like, what did I do? What did I say? Because all of us, when we're speaking any foreign language, anyone who's ever spoken a foreign language has had the moment of saying something that they think is right and fine, and the other person they're talking to being like, what?
Yeah. What did you just say? You really just mean you want to shoot me? Right.
But at that moment, I couldn't understand what I had said that was wrong. I just knew that I had said something wrong. So I felt that feeling of like, oh man, I just said something wrong in front of 30 people who are my son's peers' parents
who I have to deal with for the next 3 years. Yes.
And I didn't know what was wrong. So after I asked someone who I knew, and she also speaks English, but I think we were having the conversation in Japanese. I can't remember. But anyway, I asked her, like, what happened? What did I say? And she said, well, when you mentioned English, I think some people feel sensitive about that because they want their children to be able to speak English. And your son is a native English speaker. And so maybe there's some sensitivity there for them about that. And I was just so surprised. Like, I thought she was going to say, you made this grammar mistake, or you made this vocabulary mistake, or, you said that you're really an alien and, without meaning to. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of thing that has happened before, when I've made that kind of mistake or seen that kind of look on the faces of the people I'm talking to. So I was just really surprised by that. Because of course I know that English is highly valued here. It's what brought me to Japan, was that people wanted to learn English. I wouldn't be here if people didn't prize the ability to speak English.
Yeah.
But I was very surprised that that would be the response when I'm a native English speaker and that everybody knows it.
Obviously. Yeah.
But I also, in some way, I could frame it as a compliment that they were looking at me as completely their peer. They weren't looking at me as a foreigner in Japan. They were looking at me as another mother. And, there are times as a foreigner in Japan when you feel like, could you just see me like a person, just a normal person?
Yeah, just normal, just like you. Yeah.
Yeah. And they were doing that for me, actually, in that moment. They were just seeing me as another mother. And when I spoke about English, they were shocked because if a Japanese mother had done that, it would have maybe felt like bragging or, something like that. So when I frame it in that way, it feels like, okay, well, that's, kind of nice that they were seeing me as one of them and not somebody weird and special and foreign, but it was also confusing,
totally. And, just listening to you recount this experience, I'm right there with you in the classroom and going, why is everybody looking at me like that? What have I said? That's happened so many times. And how, is the topic of English such a minefield? The fact that something that's so natural to you to speak your own language, we are obviously lucky that our own language is English and that it's highly coveted these days by parents in Japan wanting their kids to be bilingual and putting in a lot of time, effort, and money into their children to try to make that happen. Whereas, for us, it's not, of course, it's not automatic. It takes work as well, but we do have a very high, at the upper edge, significant benefits to being native speakers of English in Japan and giving that environment to our kids when they come home. But our kids also have to put up with a parent who did not do third grade elementary school and can't read the kanji, or maybe they can, but they don't know that particular reading of the kanji, like yomikata. Yesterday, my daughter was testing me on her 4th grade homework. Mummy, do you know this one? And I'm like, I got some of them, or I was pretty close. And other ones, I was just like, yeah, no. And she took great pleasure in telling me the meaning of them. And I'm like, well, that's good. At least you know, because at least you know what your homework says, because I don't know. And sometimes we have to get the iPhone out and look stuff up together and things. But my 1st grade son, I can still help him. We're still at the river, stream, tree kind of thing. But he's already getting to the point where he doesn't believe me. And yesterday he was asking me, what's the kanji for saki ni? Yeah. And because he just learned it at school, but he kind of like forgotten. And I'm like, it's the same kanji as the sen and sensei. And he's like, it is not. And I'm like, yeah, it is. And so we get the phone out. I'm like, look. And so he believed the phone. But he hadn't made the connection that sensei sen can also be saki ni saki, right? Like, and so he did get that connection after our discussion. So I'm like, well, yay, but oh my God, what a drama just for that. All parents experience this. Be nice to know. But this is what we're dealing with, that the Japanese parents obviously have zero idea of. And even my husband, who's right here in the house, doesn't understand my struggles to understand the children's maths homework, or it's in Japanese, like nightmare. So I feel you on that, Paige, and I'm sure many of our listeners out there will be also feeling you on that very Japanese experience of being in Japan. Very, like, whether it's in a school or at your office and you say something and everybody looks at you like you've just stepped off a spaceship. It happens, and I'm sure it happens all over the world, not just Japan, right? But so that experience, especially in the classroom, right, in front of 30 people. Who are already like measuring their kid up against your kid anyway. Where I live, like, English is very highly coveted by the parents who are very educationally focused and minded. And I hear a lot of discussion from my daughter about, oh, so-and-so does this many naraigoto, so after school activities. And I only do one. And I'm like, you're doing naraigoto every day after you get home from school. That's your English. You're having English for 4 hours after school every day. I don't think your classmates are doing English, even though it's their native, another one of their languages, they're working on it in different ways in our house. So yes, you were only going to one naraigoto outside of the house. This is how we manage. She's like, oh, okay. So it's just like, oh, you think I just let you watch Netflix for an hour and a half every day? You think that it's actually you are learning English, right? She's like, oh yeah. I'm like, yeah.
And then they'll start saying stuff to you. It always surprises me when they say stuff to me that I never say. So I know they learned it from Netflix or wherever. My son said the other day, my daughter was talking to him saying something, and he was like, I'm not following. And somehow I was like, I don't say that. So I can't remember the last time I said I'm not following. So he must have learned it from TV.
Somewhere. Totally. Yeah.
And it's pretty cool, actually.
It is pretty cool. And how lucky are we? Like, do you remember, like, even like 5 or 6 years ago, how hard it was to get English stuff for our kids to spend time with, books or TV. And now it's just like, okay, what are you going to do? Netflix or Amazon Prime? Or are you going to read a book online, or, which of the bazillion books that we can get on Audible for you, or, online libraries and all these things that we have. It's fabulous for us. So we are very, very lucky. And my daughter was born, was totally different, right?
Yes. My son was born in 2008. And back then,
oh God.
I mean, the whole landscape was totally different. We didn't even have, I think smartphones had been invented, but most people didn't have them.
Nobody had one.
I had a clamshell phone in the hospital. So, I mean, it's just totally different than it was back then. You're incredibly lucky. also for ourselves too, just to
Yeah.
have a connection with our own language and our own culture in a way. When I first came here, books I love to read, I just would be in pain from lack of
Mm,
books, and
yeah.
searching for books was like a big part of how I spent my free time, and they were expensive. It
Yeah.
was really
Yeah.
hard. So like I had to fit into my budget how many books I could have, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And yeah, now I can listen, I can read, I can really actually read as much as I want to now,
Mm,
which was not possible 19.
totally. Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I actually discovered something recently, and I know we're getting sort of off track here, but I think this is important to mention. I discovered something recently about my library here
Hmm.
in Japan. The books that are on the shelf are just a tiny fraction of what they actually have. So even the English section is it's probably a good sort of like 5 or 6 big shelves worth of English books. And I always look at them and go, there's such a random collection of books here. Where's the first one in this series? Why is it not on the shelf? Why do they only have this one?
Hmm.
But then when I go and I actually look in the catalog, I'll find that, oh, they do actually have these books. I just have to request them because they're in the back shelf room. And
Oh,
that my library has a massive back shelf area, which you actually can see that they've got this big glass wall where you can go and look at this like machine that goes around and picks up all the books off the. It's kind of like Harry Potter, and they
yeah.
have all the books like from floor to ceiling, massive shelves, and there's a place where you can go and look at it, and then that's where all the books are. So even if you go to your local library and you're like, there's no books here, may not be the case. That if you search in their searching system, you may find way more books than you expect, which is what I noticed recently. Very good learning.
That is great to know. Yeah, I
Mm.
had never heard that, but that is great to know. Yes.
And I live in Fukushima. So if you're in Tokyo,
Right.
potentially even better situation for you.
Yeah, I'm sure there are plenty. I've had the same situation of looking at the one shelf with maybe like the one, what do you call it, hondana, like with 6 shelves in it, like, and looking at it being like, this is it. This is all you have. Like,
Is that all they have it at the library you go to?
yeah, the closest
Really?
library to me doesn't have much. Although I will admit, because they didn't have much, I haven't gone back recently, to
It's a
look.
perpetuating spiral of
Right.
the shelf space shrinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I should go back and look and see what else they have there.
Yeah, I check their online catalog now
Mhm.
potentially as well. Yeah. So recently, I don't even have to go to the library. I
Right.
just go online, select the books, and they get delivered to my local community center. And I just go and pick them up when they're delivered. And then I drop them back off again because the library is a good 30-minute drive from my house,
Right.
the central library, where the big shelves of all the
Okay, right.
English books are. So that's a very Inaka kind of description of, of going to the library. But that's another service that they have that a lot of people don't know about, is that you don't actually have to go to the central library. Perhaps it's far away, like the big flash library, but you can get that delivered closer to you and just go and pick them up down the street as well. So
Wonderful. Yeah.
there
That's
you go. Oh, wow. Well, Paige, it's been so nice to spend this time with you, to get to know you a little bit more, to hear about what you're doing. And yeah, I really hope lots of listeners will start to show up for the Monday morning creativity co-creation sessions.
I would
And
love
I'm really like to get in there a little bit more. I have to think about rearranging my schedule, prioritizing my own creative projects over
that.
all of the other things I have to do in my daily life. Yeah.
I would love to see you anytime. It's so nice to have
Yeah.
you.
Thank
Yeah.
you. All right. We'll catch you again soon.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me today. It was lovely to talk to you.
So that was the interview with Paige. I hope you enjoyed hearing all about creativity and creativity coaching and her co-creation time that she has on Monday mornings. You'll be able to find links for that in the show notes. And I think the part of the episode that spoke to me the most was at the end when Paige shared her very Japanese moment, or a moment that had stood out to her about life in Japan, is having that moment when you say something and everybody looks at you and you're not sure if you've said something grammatically incorrect or culturally incorrect or whatever. And sometimes it can be really hard to find someone who will explain why everybody was so sort of shocked or what you've done wrong. So having that insight that Paige got from her friend for my own life, I feel was a huge bonus in that story. So I really want to thank Paige for sharing that quite vulnerable story about being the person being stared at by 30 people in the classroom. I know I've had that happen as well, and sort of was left wondering, oh, is it me? What have I said? And, usually people are fairly forgiving to me, which I appreciate. But yeah, just knowing, okay, so in that case, maybe that could have been heard as potentially bragging, or that even though in my intention was not to brag, but just to explain what it's like, or to share my reality, which is that I don't understand third grade kanji, and it's quite not humiliating, but it is, it's not fun being illiterate in, in your daily life and not being able to help your kid with their homework. So thank you so much for sharing that, Paige. And that's all for this week. I will see you again soon with more wonderful interviews with wonderful women in Japan doing great things. Take care. Bye.